And we're online, Your Worship.
Kia ora. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second Kaipara District Council webinar for our long-term plan 2021-31. Beaming at you live from various destinations right across Kaipara District between Dargaville and Mungfi. So hopefully tonight the internet will hold up. It wasn't very good last week, but here's hoping that the technology works. So good evening, everyone. My name's Jason Smith. I'm the Mayor of Kaipara District, and I'm now going to open our evening with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, hei hua rahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Thank you. So for this evening, we have the people on the screen that you can see include, with myself, 4 of our councillors. So this is half of the councillors of Kaipara District Council. So we have Deputy Mayor Anna Curnow, beaming in from Mungfi. Also from Mungfi, we have Councillor Peter Wethy. We have a wave, thank you. From Dargaville, we have Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins. And then from near Paparoa, we have Councillor Mark Vincent. So this will be our team for this evening for our presentation that we're about to do for you and for the questions that you will be able to provide through via Facebook and the chat function there. So what I'd like to do now is that Gavin, who's hosting this event, is now going to start sharing the screen and start sharing a presentation that we're about to go through. So thank you, Gavin. This presentation, of course, as we've indicated, is for our long-term plan consultation document. Now, this is our plan for the next 10 years of Kaipara District Council. And so we are working here as part of sharing our messages for what the priorities are that Kaipara District Council has put in place, and very importantly, for the key questions that we want to hear about from you for the key information for the future. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So the long-term plans, of course, are for 10 years. And so the numbers here start to get quite big because we are talking, of course, about 10 years, not just a one-year program. But we, as a council, are looking at investing $375 million over the next 10 years on projects, and this is the important bit, projects that are not shiny, special, bright things. These are really fundamental things about council and getting right the things that are priorities for our community. Now, we've already been working with the community. Several months ago, we had engagement where we asked people what the priorities needed to be, and that helped us. People were putting stickers on various sheets of paper. That's helped us with the work that you can see before us now. So very importantly, as you would know from across all of New Zealand, there are a whole lot of water pipes in various councils that are breaking. There are road issues. There are these core, what we call infrastructure issues. So that is our priority as a council, is to focus on what is most important for us and for our community as we move forward. All of the detail of the numbers that you can see here are outlined in our consultation document, which of course is on Kaipara District Council's web page at /LTP for long-term plan. Next slide, please, Gavin. The rates increases, everyone always very quickly goes to what is the rates increase that is going to be ahead for the community. Now, if you look at the table or the chart that's on this next slide, very key is the red or the orange line at the top of that, which is the limit which the elected members that you've voted for have said that we want to be the maximum rates percentage increase on average for properties across Kaipara District for this long-term plan. So we've capped that, if you like, at 5%. So for the first year of the LTP, the average rates increase is looking to be 3.37%. Now, Wellington came out last week at 13.7%, but Kaipara has come out here saying 3.37. So very importantly as well, across the decade ahead, we're also in a good position regarding the debt. Again, many people kind of say Kaipara District Council has a crippling level of debt. Well, frankly, we're at about 50% of what was the 2014 peak of Kaipara District Council's debt. So we're in a much better place than we used to be. So the consultation document includes the revenue strategy, the financing strategy, and the financial strategy. And very importantly, that information is all very much available for the community as part of the consultation for the long-term plan. So please wrap your heads around that. So one of the issues, of course, we're looking here, the yellow line that cuts across the bottom of this chart is the average rates percentage increase for the decade that the council is proposing, and that is at 3%. Now, some properties in the district will have a higher rates amount than that because their property value will have gone up, and others where their property value will have gone down, their rates will be below that. So remember, those complex calculations are happening in the background as well. But really importantly, this is our foundation level. Gavin, next slide, please. So based on that 3.37%, that is what your elected members of the council have said. That's where we're coming in at. That's our start position. And then we've got some key subjects and key questions that we need guidance on from you in the community about the priorities that you see to help us shape what the final rates level may be and the final long-term plan may include. So we have a set of key decisions here. So we're just going to move into these 7 key decisions. So what I'm going to do at this point is start involving some of our elected members here who are on the screen with answering some and talking through some of these presentations. So for the waste minimisation piece here, I'm going to bring in Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins from Dargaville to talk through these particular sets of slides. Thank you, Erin. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have to say waste minimisation is obviously really important in the Kaipara District, and when I was running for election, it was one of the things that I was spoken to a lot about was our recycling and our waste minimisation. So here is an opportunity for the public to have a say in what they would like to happen next. So we historically have a poor track record for our recycling, and a 2020 audit of our rubbish bags found that 27% of the contents could have actually been recycled. So we're now looking for ways to help our residents make recycling easier across the district. So Gavin, if you could put on the next slide. Okay, so we have 2 options to choose from. Option 1 is our preferred option, and I'm hoping that this will be interesting for some residents. We're looking at introducing recycling crates, and there will be 2 crates for each household. One will be for glass and one will be for plastic and aluminium, and then you'll be able to bundle up your newspapers and cardboard separately for collection. It'll be curbside collection for as many residents as we can do. Obviously, the rural collections will have a collection drop point. If you take your recycling to a transfer station, it will then be free of charge. Now, that means that this will be funded by a rate on your property rather than a user pay scheme as we have at the moment. So it's going to be $146 per household per year. On average. The first year will be $156 because we'll need to cover the costs of the layout of all the bins and the service. So the range for the rest of those years is $126 to $164. The option 2 that we're asking for feedback on is whether we maintain the status quo. So that means that we all continue to purchase the yellow recycling bags, and we recycle at the transfer station for a small fee. Next slide, Gavin. Okay, so that's the end of those slides for waste minimisation.
Thank you. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Councillor Wilson-Collins, for that. So, as you can see, there is a choice for people to make. The choice there has not been included in the draft budgets. The choice that people may be making. So, if the preferred option would be on top of the 3.37% rates increase. So, regarding equalising water supply and wastewater rates, for this item, Councillor Anna Curnow, Deputy Mayor, if you would please come in and introduce this item. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Certainly, I'm happy to explain this one. So at the moment, we have rates for drinking water and for wastewater that tend to be different wherever you are. There are parts of the rates that are spread across different communities and parts of them that are specific to certain communities. So it's quite inconsistent, it's difficult to manage, and it also has some significant risks for smaller communities as you start to get big ticket kind of maintenance coming through or renewals coming through. Those small communities have very few people to bear those costs when they are specific to those communities. So we are looking at the principle of if you can flush a toilet and turn your tap on, then it doesn't matter where you are in Kaipara, that's the same service. And so we want to spread those costs to be consistent across the whole district. There are a few of our drinking water schemes that have got some government funding through the Three Waters program, and we can, and so those schemes are benefiting, but the others aren't. So yeah, so we're looking at some options around equalising those water supply and wastewater rates. If we could go to the next slide, please, Gavin. So we've got two options in this case. One of them is to equalise across the networks. So that would basically be the same single fixed rate for wastewater and water for anybody connected to or able to be connected to council supplied networks. So we charge those that are able to be connected to, because there is a benefit to your property in terms of the value of your property and being able to connect to it. It's also that the costs of these schemes are spread across a number of people, and if you have the benefit of being able to connect, then we would encourage you to connect because it's better for you, and it also helps to share the costs. So it allows an even share of costs and benefits, and it reduces the administration of all those different rates into one for wastewater. Water is charged by volume, so that would stay, the volumetric charge would stay in place, but it would be the same charge wherever you are, as opposed to different volumetric rates for different schemes. So yeah, and basically that comes back to that same principle of if you can turn on the tap or flush a toilet, you're getting the same service across the district. So that's our preferred option. Our second option is to take all the costs for each individual scheme and show and allocate it to the residents who are attached to that scheme. So obviously that means that there are some significant challenges if you have a big ticket item, like you have to desludge your sewage ponds, or you have to relay a whole lot of pipes. Now, if you're a small community with only a few people, that means that's a very high burden of cost for that community to bear. So we would rather share those costs across the network, but we are very keen to hear your views about what you think we should do in this case. So I think that summarises that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So for the third decision, of which we are asking our people and the community of Kaipara about this key issue, I'm going to call on Councillor Mark Vincent to talk to the idea of securing our water supplies.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the notice. Yeah, so the situation is, as people who live in the Dargaville Bailey's area will be well aware that we've been through a quite extreme drought conditions, and the usual norm in the summer months is for those areas in particular to run short of water and have water restrictions imposed. And there has been some suggestion in the past too of the idea of being more enabling of people to put their own water tanks on their properties in the residential areas. However, that ain't going to solve the problem of building up the reservoir for that later use elsewhere, because the supply from the Kaihu River is run of stream. So when we're having a drought, the Kaihu River's low. So what we need is some form of enhanced storage, and that's where we're headed. And bearing in mind that in the last season we called on councils to the north and south of us, or at least water supply companies did, and we can't assume that that will continue for the future. So we need to be able to provide for ourselves. Next slide, please. Thank you, Kevin. So we've got a couple of options here, and one, of course, as in all cases, is the maintain the status quo, and I guess you've got an idea of what that could look like in the future with what we experienced last season, and just every little bit of growth that happens in those areas like Bailey's and Dargaville will only exacerbate that problem. So we have this other alternative of the Taitokerau Trust entity establishing a reservoir and ultimately a series of reservoirs, which their initial focus is on assisting some agricultural diversity with being able to grow crops which would thrive with a bit more water being guaranteed to be available. So the intention is to for the council to become, I guess, a cornerstone customer and connect to that raw water reservoir, and we build a small treatment plant near Te Koparu, and then it means that that treated water can be connected directly to the Dargaville and Bailey's water network. So just to do that, we're looking at a cost of just over $2 million to get that off the ground. Next slide, please. I think I've done my bit.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vincent. So regarding that water storage item, is that figure is included in the rates increase that council has already proposed? So it's not an additional thing, which some of these other items are additional, but this one is factored in because it is absolutely essential for us in this space. On this subject, the next subject here of climate change. So for this item, I'm going to ask Councillor Peter Withy to introduce this item on climate change, which also includes a baseline which is built into our current draft budget. Thank you, Councillor Withy.
Yes, kia ora, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, climate change is certainly something which I think everyone throughout New Zealand, let alone just our district, has heard a lot of in the last year or two. It has become it's a very significant thing, and it particularly affects Kaipara. With the anticipated and forecast rises in sea level caused by climate change, we have a number of very vulnerable areas. So it's absolutely essential that we do take these into account in terms of our planning over this next 10-year period. That is why, as the Mayor said, the initial minimum requirement, which is basically mandated to local government territorial authorities, has already been included in the rate increase that the Mayor has earlier talked about. What we're talking about, though, is whether we do actually do more than that, and this is where we're wanting to get some indication from the rest of the community who are living day by day on the effects of climate change, whether they want council to do more work than just the minimum mandated at present. Bearing in mind also, this is a moving feast. It's like a number of legislative directions coming out of central government. They tend to change, and climate change, we believe, over the next year or two will actually change in terms of the amount of work that local body government is going to be required to do. But we need to set ourselves up on a course we're able to cope with what's required from us, and that does require a lot of planning and involvement with other territorial authorities in the Northland region. So that is built into the initial minimum base that we've included in the rates. So next slide, please, Gavin. So we've got 3 options for feedback, which we'd like members of the community to advise us. The first one, which is the preferred one, is the baseline. And this basically requires council to commit $1.5 million over the 10 years. And it sets the council up to meet the current legislation and what we anticipate those requirements may be as we move forward. However, it is just remembering a very initial base of information that we're looking at there. Option 2, which is what we've called the climate smart option. This covers the baseline, which is option 1, but adds to that an adaptation action plan. It has a mitigation action plan and a sustainable action plan. So there's a lot more additional plans overlaid onto the option 1 in the first instance. Now that will cost $1.8 million over 10 years. And if we want to go to a third option, which is a climate smart plus option, this is like a bit like going up your credit cards from a base credit card, gold and platinum. This is the platinum plus version, in our opinion, as we know it today. The climate smart plus option expands all of the previous ones into adaptive pathways to 3 priority coastal areas. It supports communities, the mana whenua, stakeholders, businesses, and it helps to prepare a strategy for future adaptation. But it does come at an additional cost. We're talking about $3 million over 10 years. And those 2 extra options, options 2 and 3, are not built into the 3.37% general rate increase. Only option 1, the preferred option, is. So if the community wishes to see the council doing more, then that will obviously add more to a rate increase. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. So on your screen, you can see we're talking now about the Dargaville Civic Precinct. and these costs have been included in our draft budgets. I'm going to talk to this item. So the challenge that the council has right now is that the current set of council buildings, between and among them, are presenting risks and are in a poor condition. And so the council has a real requirement to make the building safe and useful for all the people of the community. Next slide, Gavin. So we have some options for the community, and this is extremely complex to think about, but we're actually looking at creating a complete civic precinct around the Northern Wairoa Town Hall in Dargaville. Now, as you would know, Northland Regional Council is building a new office building immediately across the road from the Northern Wairoa Town Hall. So, and our current staff of Kaipara District Council will be moving into that Northland Regional Council owned building, possibly at the end of this year, beginning of next year. So the red brick current council building, which is no longer fit for purpose, has health and safety issues for the staff who work in it, then is being proposed by the council to be demolished. That's an interesting story. In that space, council is looking at creating a green space, a park, so that that land, the important land there, over the road from the town hall, over the road from the courthouse, is part of a green space for the future of Dargaville Town, for other options for the community decades from now, if the community wants to. We are also looking on the town hall side and being required to demolish the 1990s, what's called the annex, or the parts that fit between the town hall with the badminton courts and the stage in it, and the municipal building, the old two-storied building that houses the cinema right now. The bit between that, the kind of foyer for the town hall, has ended up being a leaky building, which has, again, health and safety challenges and fungus challenges. So the proposal at this point is that that current building that people are familiar with, that space, is demolished. And here's the important thing. In its place, being led by a new community trust to be formed, would rise a new space that could include a library, meeting rooms, civic spaces, and an indoor civic precinct, the likes of which Kaipara District has never seen before. That's option one here. Option two, which is not the council's preferred option, is to leave those current buildings, which literally are falling apart, as they go, and leave them in place, and quite simply leave them abandoned and allow the situation of those buildings to get worse. The council believes that that is not a sensible approach, and so we are saying, let's be courageous here and put in place a community trust to develop the civic precinct, this extraordinary new community building with a new library in it for Dargaville and the community, that will form part of shaping the community services for Dargaville into the future. That's what we want to hear from the community here. This is called decision number 5A. Gavin, if we can go to decision number 5B, this is in our civic part of the presentation. We are looking at developing a Mungfi library. And for the important period that we're looking at right now, is that we're looking for guidance from the community about whether we should acquire a new site for the library, and being courageous about building a multi-million-dollar library that would be funded by many of the new arrivals to the community through their development contributions, or option 2, that the community says no, that the current library, which functions next door to the Mungfi hall, the village hall, that will do. Now, the council's position is that that won't do for our wonderful, vibrant, growing community. So we're wanting to hear feedback from you on these important projects here regarding a Mungfi library and, of course, a Dargaville Civic Precinct here. If we can move to the next slide. For the notion of regional economic development and the council-controlled organisation, I'm going to call in Councillor Anna Curnow, Deputy Mayor Anna Curnow here to speak to this item. But the important thing for you to know is that at present, we are already partly funding the Regional Economic Development CCO, and that we have included the costs in our draft budgets for the co-ownership of the CCO that Councillor Curnow, Deputy Mayor, is about to explain. Kia ora.
Okay, kia ora again. So with the Regional Economic Development CCO, just to be clear, a CCO is a council-controlled organisation. So it's sort of halfway between a council and a company. So it has a little bit more leeway to get on with the job in hand. So getting back to the beginning, Kaipara's tourism and economic activity is underdeveloped if we compare it to other districts. We certainly have a underdeveloped tourism industry, and our economy is very strong in some sectors and not very diverse. So there's some work to do to spread Kaipara's economy and make it more resilient. And so this is one way that we could do that. We are to avoid us missing out on any future potential economic opportunities. Yeah, so if we could move on to the next slide, Gavin, then I can talk about what the opportunities are. So the option 1, which is our preferred option, which we have already included in the rates increase, as the Mayor has said, is that we invest in becoming a joint owner of Northland Inc. as our regional economic development agency. And by doing so, we then, as part owners, get the opportunity to start to have a say in setting the strategy for Northland Inc. And setting the direction for economic development in Kaipara. What the investment that we're looking at would give us a 33% ownership in Northland Inc. And we've never had any ownership in Northland Inc. before, and we've struggled, it would be fair to say, struggled to get their attention. So as I said, we've already budgeted that into the 3.37 rates increase. The second option is to maintain the status quo, where we have very little input into Northland Inc's priorities, and we just continue on as we're doing now. So yeah, I think that summarises that.
Thank you. Thank you. And also, as part of our LTP, and I'm going to bring in Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins here for our final decision from the community, but as part of our LTP, the Council was approached by the Dargaville Community Development Board with a proposal for the Council to collect a targeted rate for a project that board, community board, has initiated or proposed themselves. So this is, if you like, in this instance, the council is talking to this item that the Community Development Board has proposed. So Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins of Dargaville.
Kia ora, thanks very much. Yeah, so as the Mayor has explained, this is actually an initiative by the Dargaville Community Development Board. This isn't a council project, and what they've asked us to ask the community is if the community would be acceptable to us imposing a targeted rate in the Dargaville and Ruawai areas, And we would simply collect that rate and pass it back to the DCDB to facilitate the CCTV project that they're already running. So it's up and running already, and they want to improve that and increase the scope. The idea is to improve the safety and reduce crime in Dargaville and Ruawai, and improve business confidence and provide security benefits to those communities. Next slide, please, Given. Thank you. So two options again here. Our preferred option 1 is to collect the targeted rate on behalf of the DCDB, and that would look to be around $10 per rating unit. The rate is targeted to the Dargaville, West Coast Central, and Ruawai and Tokotoka Township. As I said, we would collect that and pass it back on to the DCDB. So we're not doing this project at all, not a council project. The option 2 is to maintain the status quo. Council would not be collecting the targeted rate, and the Dargaville Community Development Board would have to look elsewhere for funding. You've probably seen in the newspapers and on Facebook that the DCDB is trying to get word out there about this. So there's a lot of information out there for the public to find out about. And of course, you can send your questions in on that Facebook page that you're watching on, and we can answer them after the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you all the councillors. So the opportunity, that's the quick run through on the presentation for the long-term plan. At this point, there is an opportunity for the elected members who are present to be answering questions from the community, which you are posing to us. So at this point, we're going to start going hot and live to some of the questions that are coming through here. So these again will be answered from across the elected members if any particularly want to answer these questions. Thank you. So the first question that we have, and I'll answer this, regarding the water rates and regarding the notion of Three Waters reform impact on water rates. Now, the Three Waters reform heard in the national news media is something that's being proposed by central government at this point, and one of the potential pathways there is that there is going to be a significant shake-up of who is going to be owning and looking after water and water rates. Now, the question that we have is the following: is Kaipara District Council opting into this reform? Now, at this point in time, as we sit here at the end of the start of the second week in March, Kaipara District Council has made a decision so far to continue in the process, to continue hearing more about what those reforms represent. And there are further decisions down the line, months from now, where Kaipara District Council will be making a decision to opt, whether it will opt out of the reforms. The default setting of the government here is that all councils are in the reform process. So Kaipara District Council would need to opt out. For us, with the preparation of the long-term plan, Kaipara District Council and all the other councils of New Zealand have been obliged, and the Office of the Auditor General is part of this work, have been obliged to proceed with the preparation of long-term plans currently as if those Three Waters reforms are not proposed or not taking place. At any moment, government, in theory, could say they don't want to do those reforms anymore, and that stops. So we have to be prudently planning as if that's not going to happen regarding those Three Waters reforms. So for us, and is KDC opting into or not opting into the Three Waters reforms? frankly, we'll cross that bridge as we come to it. We haven't got there yet. Thank you. Second question here. I'm going to come to Councillor Anna Curnow. This is about Ruawai being on individual septic tanks. And so, Councillor Curnow, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, that's a fairly straightforward question. You will only be charged the rates for water or wastewater if you are connected to a council-run scheme for either of those. So if you're on a council drinking water scheme, then you would be charged the targeted rate. If you're on a council wastewater scheme, you would be charged the targeted rate. If you have your own septic tank and you're not, I guess there is a subtlety in there. If that you have your own septic tank, but you are in an area where you could easily connect to a council scheme, then you would be charged the connectable rate, which is less than the full rate, but you are still charged for the benefit of being able to connect. But the key principle in Ruawai, there is no wastewater scheme in Ruawai, so no, you would not be charged a targeted rate for wastewater in Ruawai.
Thank you. Thank you. The third question regarding water equalization that we can see on our chat screen. So does one of the councillors particularly want to answer this? I'm happy to answer it. Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins, thank you.
Thank you. So the question that we're being asked is, will equalising mean the targeted rate rises? At the moment, there's actually quite a big difference depending on where you are, what that targeted rate is. So some parts of the district are paying a lot more than others. By equalising that targeted rate, that means we'll all be paying the same. But it does mean some areas will see a decrease in their targeted rate and some areas will see an increase. So it varies across the district. Our consultation document does have all the figures. So I would really encourage people to seek that out on our website and have a read of how it will affect you and how it will affect other parts of the community, actually, because the equalising rate really is about looking out for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. So regarding the next question, which is about waste minimisation, is there an elected member who'd like to answer this? Councillor Wilson-Collins, actually, probably.
Yes, thank you. I'll jump in again. So the question now about waste minimisation is, have we considered using wheelie bins for either recycling or rubbish? So wheelie bins seem like a really great idea for rubbish, but other councils across the country have provided information that actually proves that if we have a wheelie bin for our rubbish, we just fill it up with more rubbish. And obviously we're talking about waste minimisation. So we really want to encourage everybody to put less and less into their rubbish bin, so less goes to landfill. So to do that, we don't think wheelie bins for rubbish is a good idea. There's also going to be a lot of changes from central government about waste and landfill. And that's going to actually probably change what packaging there is, how everything is disposed of. So at this point in time, wheelie bins for rubbish isn't a viable option. And wheelie bins for recycling, I expect it's more cost effective to use a crate system. So that would be why we're looking at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next subject area that questions have come to us about is about climate change. And so is one of the elected members particularly bursting to talk? Councillor Curnow, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, so the costs that we've talked about for climate change are partly to do with planning. So there's a lot of planning involved to get this right. But it's also what we talked about, adaptation planning with communities. So the baseline, my understanding is in the baseline package, we do one community. The climate smart package, we do two, and climate smart plus, we do three. So, and that's within those first 3 years that we're really looking at sort of working on that. Now, we've gone with the baseline because we think that we probably have the time to start with one, and then in 3 years' time, when we do our next LTP, we'll know more about the modelling, we'll know more about the legislation that is forming in this space, and so we can maybe ramp it up then. So that's why we went with the baseline. But yeah, if communities feel like we need to start with 2 or even 3 communities, then we can certainly do that, but there will be a little bit of an additional cost to get started in that space.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question regarding property revaluations. This is the QV part of revaluations. It only came out a couple of weeks ago to everyone all across the district. Does one of our elected members want to answer this question? Councillor Mark Vincent, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had to press my unmute button. Yeah, I guess that while we haven't had any properties actually lose value, there's a number of assumptions we have to make. And one is, firstly, strip out any targeted rates, which we were going for our proposal is to have equalised sewerage and water rates. So for some people, that part of their rates will go up or down, depending on how that turns out. But as far as the general rate is concerned, the critical figure, if you are looking at how much your property value has gone up, the critical figure is whether or not it is more or less than the average. Because if all other things being equal and we had no rates increase across the district, if there was everybody's property value went up by the same percentage, the distribution of rates would stay the same. But where in some parts of the district we have increases in rates and above the average, and other parts where it's below the average, and that statistically that must happen, then those who have gone up less than the average will, all other things being equal, and say we have a 0 rate rise, and we're proposing a 3.37 rate increase at this stage, then that will affect the final figure. So it is actually it can be quite confusing, and it's a difficult concept for people who haven't been through it before to take in. But that's the general principle of it. Look for the average rate increase, which actually one of the staff might be able to fill me in. I think it's around 14% or something like that is the average figure. So if you've got less than that number as the increase in your property value, then you are likely to be having a decrease in your rate. If it's more than the average, then you're going to get more. I'd be happy if someone wants to contradict me on that, but that's how I see it anyway.
No, that's perfectly clear. Remembering community and the people watching that all of this information is available in great detail in the consultation document and on Kaipara District Council's website. But Councillor Vincent's description was accurate there. Thank you. We'll move on now to our next question, which is about the Civic Precinct. With a simple question here: would it not be cheaper just to fix the buildings? So, Councillor Curnow.
Really simple answer to that: no. We've had costs. We've, of course, as part of the process of coming to this option, we did a lot of evaluation on what's the nature of the problem and how much would it cost to fix. And also, you know, if we take it, particularly say with the red brick building, if we decided to sell that, what would we get? Or if we decided to rent it out, what would we get? Also, what are the costs of repairing them? The costs of repairing just don't stack up. The costs of renting out don't stack up, because the costs of actually getting that building to a state where we could rent it out mean that it just doesn't work out. We would be losing money by doing that. So economically, the best option for that building does appear to be to demolish it. And with the other building, yes, we have looked at repairing, and again, so this is the municipal building across the road from the red brick building, the bits between the municipal building and the town hall, so the annex and the meeting room on the far end. We've looked at the costs of repairing those, and we could do that, but again, the costs of repairing them would mean that they are enormous, and we're talking many millions of dollars here, and we still wouldn't have an outcome that is actually useful, because unfortunately that space over by the town hall is not particularly useful in terms of what council needs it for now, in terms of looking at moving a library into that space and more community meeting spaces. So all up, I said it was going to be a simple answer, but it is no, but there was a bit of an explanation in behind that.
Thank you. The next question is about the CCTV, and it's very simple. I'll just answer this. Where is the area proposed for the new targeted rate? So the new targeted rate would be proposed for Dargaville Ward, West Coast Central Ward, and the Ruawai Tokatoka area that currently pays for the Ruawai Tokatoka War Memorial Hall in Ruawai. So that's about the Ruawai Township. So those are the areas, targeted rates for those specific areas: Dargaville, West Coast Central, and the Ruawai Tokatoka area that already has targeted. All of those already have targeted rates. Thank you. Next question is about recycling. Why does it cost to recycle? Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. This is a great question. It comes up a lot when recycling is discussed. So there actually are a lot of costs to recycling, including the curbside collection, the processing, the transporting and selling of the recycled product. And unfortunately, the proceeds from selling that product don't cover all the costs. Recycling really is a do-good activity rather than a money-making one. So it just simply is that the revenue that is created from selling off products to be recycled just does not cover the costs that are needed to actually complete the recycling.
Thank you. The next question that we have is around water storage, and the question here looks like Councillor Peter Wethy is wanting to answer this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the point that's being made here to be understood is that council would be investing something like $2.1 million in a pipeline and supplementary treatment plant to take that water from the water storage dams and make it into a potable supply that can supplement the supply for Dargaville and Bailey's Beach. The comment that's been made by the questionnaire about being a founding member, I think is probably more accurately describe the council as a founding customer. The investment that they're making in this add-on water supply scheme is actually on assets that will go onto council's books. It's not on assets that go into a Te Tokerau water trust or anything like that. So we will be a customer as opposed to a founding member, which might imply that we're part of the trust itself. I think that's the way council's seen it and had it presented to it up to date.
Thank you. So we have a further question regarding water equalization and the equalization of the rates for drinking water and wastewater. And the question is, will this affect those connected to the raw water lines. This is the untreated water lines for farming or stock purposes. So this is untreated water that, for example, may be coming down the Kaihu Valley. So this is an absolutely fabulous question, and I'm wondering who would like to answer this question. So, Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Perhaps the staff?
So it is a very interesting question. So perhaps Jim Sefton, our General Manager of Infrastructure, may be able to help with this answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try my best. It's a good question. So as a using the water from agricultural purposes, so you're still a customer in terms of the water supply, and so the same kind of logic applies, is that the rates are equalized and the costs we're spreading that in that way. We're still one of the benefits of the government investment in the three waters is that we were the recipients of 4.2 million to help us to address some of our challenges, and part of that was used in refurbishing some of the raw water connections. So basically everyone involved in the water system would have some impact, and it will help in terms of addressing whether you're on raw water in Mongatroto or in the Kaihu. It's all part of that system across Kaipara, so there is a benefit to everyone.
Thank you, Jim. We've just got a few minutes left. We've still got more questions coming in, but which is great. But we've only got a few minutes left. We're due to be concluding in 2 minutes' time our session now. The question that's come in here: could climate change initiatives be looked at like roading for Northland, where we have the Northland Transportation Alliance? More like a cooperative shared approach. That's a very, very good suggestion. And of course, the proposal that we have in our long-term plan involves very much a Northland-wide approach for climate change work and climate change adaptation across all of Northland. So both Kaipara District Council, Far North, Whangarei and Northland Regional Council, all those four councils are working together in the climate change space. What we're asking for our Kaipara community on with this consultation is, how fast do you want to go? So we've set a baseline, and then we're saying, how fast forward do you want to go into that work? Because we have opportunities to go at the speed that we want to go within Kaipara. So initiatives will be being run Northland wide, but as I say, this is the opportunity to find out how fast you want to be going. Thank you. We've also got a final question, which is not anything to do with our consultation document. So we'll call it a wild card question. I love this. A wild card question, which Councillor Anna Curnow, Deputy Mayor, is very keen to answer. And so this is there any allowance being made to advance arts and culture in Kaipara?
Well, it's not entirely unrelated to the consultation document, because if we do engage in a CCO with Northland Inc., we would regard the arts and culture as a potential economic development opportunity. So it's not entirely unrelated. And of course, there are other ways that council tries to help with our creative communities funding and with our community assistance grants that we try and support. We haven't been strong in this space because we have had it as part of an economic development approach, and we haven't had any support for economic development in the economic development space. So we're trying to fix that by getting into the CCO and working on that. So yes and no. It is kind of part of what we're looking at.
Thank you. I'd also like to add that in this LTP, Kaipara District Council is looking at building 2 new libraries, which are the core arts and culture hubs in our communities. So we're looking at building 2 of those, which is something that Kaipara District Council's never done in the past. So certainly the arts and culture, there may not be a section in the consultation document called arts and culture, but very importantly, cultural well-being and social well-being of our community are well-beings that this council is very focused on among our 4 well-beings. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We are now at the end of our question and answer session and this long-term plan presentation. So we'll have the answers to these questions will all be posted on Kaipara District Council's Facebook page over the next day or so. And there's an opportunity as well for the frequently asked questions, the kind of things that these elected members get cobbled about in the streets. Those frequently asked questions will also be being put onto the Kaipara District Council website, so people will be able to see very clearly the kinds of threads that other people are interested in. Upcoming events for the community include a presentation opportunity and discussion opportunity at the Paparoa markets on Saturday of this weekend, in Tukoparu and Mungfi next week, and Dargaville before the end of the month. So that's Tukoparu during the week next week, Mungfi next weekend, that's the 20th, and then Dargaville evening market on the Friday before the end of the month as well. So those engagement opportunities, the elected members will be there, and we're going to be all ears to be hearing from you about these priorities that you want from the long-term plan for our place. What we're trying to do, of course, is be making a better Kaipara. This consultation document is called being towards a better Kaipara, and that's exactly where we are headed. So at that point, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance this evening. I'd like to thank the elected members for coming along and joining in, as well as general managers and staff of the council. And of course, most importantly, you at home who've been watching and participating and sending in your questions. Thank you all very much for this evening. So at that point, I'm going to sign off now and close this evening's presentation with a karakia. Kia tau ngā manakitanga a te mea ngaro, ki runga ki teina a tātou, kia mahia te hua makihikihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori, tihei Māori ora. Paul Māori e.